Shalom, welcome to our Erev Shabbat talk here in Eretz Israel. I'm Avraham Shira. We're looking at Shabbat HaGadol, the great Shabbat before we go out of Egypt, before we say goodbye to Pharoah, to the master sorcerer, to the number one enemy, to the nemesis of Moses, his own son-in-law. We see that Pharoah is not just, of course, a king. The name is a king all throughout Egyptian history. But it is a source of power that dominates part of the human soul. So this is what the Kabbalah does. It takes all pieces of the Torah and shows us how it relates to us, our structure, our soul, the different levels of our being. And I just did a little a puzzle. You can do it yourself. You take any Hebrew word and you start to do permutations of letters. What that means is you make new words out of the same letters. It's kind of like Scrabble. You know, I grew up with my mom. We're playing Scrabble with all the kids. You take the letters and you flip them around. Well, you could do that with the Hebrew language. It's not just a game anymore. It's a source of wisdom and insight. And it's part of the divinity and the infinity of the Aleph Bet that God created to communicate and create the world with. So we take the word Pharoah, and Pharoah, well, the Arizal teaches us that Pharoah is the letters Ha'oref, the back of the neck. And who are the Jewish people? They're called Am Kishei Oref, the people of the stiff neck. So Pharoah is connected to this stiffness, this stubbornness in the back of the neck. You know, you ever notice when somebody gets upset or somebody gets rigid or firm about something, their shoulders go up, their chest comes out, and their neck gets very stiff, because that's Pharoah in the soul, right? And that's the Ha'oref, same letters. Just flip them around, and you suddenly get a new permutation, a new meaning, a new insight, a deeper look at the miracle of this gift that God has given us, called the Torah of Moses. Now, the word Pharoah also can be translated another way. You take the letters and flip them again, you get Peh, the aroused mouth. It's when the mouth starts getting a little excited. When a person starts talking on a jag, sometimes it's called. Right? A person starts to let himself go with his mouth, which in this week's Parsha, Mitzorah, we're dealing with a lot of laws of the Lashon Hara, evil speech. And the Zohar teaches that very, very strictly about the punishment of evil speech and speaking about others and the negativity of evil speech. And it's a very interesting thing, because I don't think a lot of people go out to speak evil about others intentionally. To do it intentionally is another whole level. But I think the nature of speech itself is that you're always on this high wire between good and evil. And you're walking across the circus tent, and you know, your speech can easily go to the good or otherwise from very few little impulses of the mind, of the heart, of the memory, and suddenly we're saying things that we really didn't even intend to say. So there are many levels of evil speech. But Peh, of course, we know that Moses called himself Kaved Peh. The Torah calls himself a stutterer, a person who could not speak in front of others. And God said, don't worry, I'll make Aaron your prophet and you'll be his God. So you see, all of a sudden, there's a gradation, there's a hierarchy between God speaking to Aaron and through Aaron and Moses, and then Aaron speaking the words to the people. Now, but the interesting thing is when a person gets excited, you'll even see that people that stutter, when they get really emotional, they even have a harder time speaking. But I've known other stutterers, the minute they start to sing, a switch happens. Now, what happens in the brain? Well, you might think that speech and song are the same in the brain, but they're not. I worked for an autist who never spoke a regular word in his life, but the minute we started to sing, he would sing the words with us. It was a miraculous moment to see a person who never spoke a word suddenly sing words. So you see that the song sprung something in his mind, a different office in his mind, let's say, than the actual speech. So turning, what it's really teaching us, though, is that when we turn the aroused speech into music, we elevate the power. We elevate the spark. And of course, when we turn that music towards Hashem himself, and we praise Hashem, we see that the Jews came out of Egypt. They crossed the sea. The sea, of course, was a life-threatening situation, and they got out on the other side. And then they saw their enemies destroyed. And what do? They sang. Now, a few minutes before, when they were on the other side of the sea, the people were complaining in the Erev Rav. The evil multitudes were saying, we got to go back to Egypt. We'd rather go back and find our watermelon patch, and the Shira basar, the cholent pot. And so you see, everybody was aroused. It's that aroused peh of Pharaoh is a problem. But when you go through the narrow place of the sea, and you see the miracle of God, then it turns the aroused peh into song. And that's Az Yeshir Moshe, with the great song that all the people, and we're taught by the Zohar, that all the people sang the same words without ever having a script. Nobody knew what Moses was going to say when he said it. So what was it? It was a moment of the multitude having the same prophecy at the same time when they sang that song. So, we can believe one person could have a prophecy and say words that he didn't prepare himself to say. But 3 million people or more, suddenly they all came out with the same song. And they were in unison. And there was a chorus, there was the bass, and there was the soprano. This is where God his power is flowing out of everyone equally, which is really the peak of the redemptive process that began when the Jews went down to Egypt 210 years earlier with Jacob and the 70 souls. So it was a long process, but it's a process that we all go through also. Because when you get that stiff neck, when you get that Pharoah in your soul is getting his goat up, as they say, and his mouth is going, and we can just get out of the constriction. How? By turning our voice to song and turning it around. And it's an amazing thing. When you're upset, when you're angry, sit down and write. You'll write amazing things. You'll write beautiful things. That's Er Peh, another permutation of the name Pharoah. So we're saying goodbye to Pharoah. We're saying goodbye to that power that false dark side king has over us by revealing who he is. And by revealing him in the soul, we can be aware of it. Now, another permutation, of course, of Pharoah is Pei-Ra, the evil mouth. The one who speaks against God, the one who speaks against Moses, and who speaks, ultimately he was a sorcerer, so he was actually conjuring evil forces with his mouth as well. That's Pei-Ra. When you use your mouth to draw power from God and turn the power around and switch the permutation of the letters, because you think the same word Paro, and you can have Rafeh Ayin. Rafeh Ayin, those same letters represent Rafeh, heal, Ayin, the eye, the healing eye. So Paro can be taken from the evil mouth to the healing eye. What's happening there? What transition are we experiencing? When you take, your heart wants to say something evil, and you see it with a good eye, you change your heart, you change your words, you turn it into music, you turn it into song. So it's a creative tool that we can use. You don't have to be a rock star, All you have to do is have a piece of paper or your phone, and sit down and start writing what you're feeling. The minute you turn it around, you convert the Pei-Ra of Paro into the Rafeh Ayin, the healing eye. And it changes the way you see the world, and you change the world by doing that. Now, another way that we can see this working, is that I just saw this week they announced, I guess in the news on Google, that they brought back some dust from the moon. Moon dust. It sounds like a song from one of our friends up in, what was his name? The singer, Marvelous Night for a Moon Dance, right? I know you know who I'm talking about. Van Morrison, right? Moon dust. So they brought back moon dust. What is moon dust? Well, it's probably, made of minerals that are very similar to those found on Earth. There's even ideas in the Kabbalah that the earth and the moon were actually a binary star system. And God said to the moon in the beginning, oh, you're complaining about two kings in the sky? Lech tima'et atzmech. God told the moon to make itself small. So that command could have taken the binary star system of our sun and made it shrink into a cold, hard rock. But nonetheless, they brought back this dust. But what does that have to do with Paro? Because the word Paro can also be re-permuted to Afar Hey. The Hey is always a symbol of the final letter of God's name, which is the earth. Haaretz, the land, which is, well, primarily dust. Primarily, soil, earth, etc. Rock, if you will. And dust is just rock ground down. So, Afar Hey. But the Hey is really the last letter of God's name, which is the power of expansion and expression. And that's why we say, Le'akim shechinte me'afra, right? One of the phrases in the Kabbalah that the purpose we have for doing mitzvot in the high traditions of the ancients is that we want to bring the Shekhinah out of the dust. But what does that mean? The Shekhinah is infinite and refined and very far from the level of dust. But the dust means that which hides the divine. So we want to bring the divine out of hiding in the dust, which of course is a metaphor for materialism, right? We want to bring the divine presence out of the material. So that's Afar Hey, the dust of the Hey, the dust of the Shekhinah, where the material has gotten to the level where it hides God's presence, and suddenly people don't believe. And suddenly atheism, God forbid, is like this cool thing. It's like they vaunt themselves and their wisdom and it's the most absurd idea in the world. How can there be a world without a creator of the world? It just was. That's like a non-argument argument. But we're not going to go there too far because there's no place to go. Now, also, we see that Paro is the back of the neck, that narrow space between the mind and the heart, because the heart is in a large space, the mind is in a larger space, but the neck is very narrow. So it's always that place where you get the crunch, where you get squeezed, where pressure is on. Like Erev Shabbat, like right now, because the sun is coming down and there's so much to do before Shabbat. But still, we understand that Paro is in that narrow place. That's why the Jews had to go through the sea to come out into the expanse of the desert, because that is the transition that you go from slavery to freedom. You're going from the ultimate constriction of the human soul, which is being a slave, to freedom, to be B'nai Horim, sons of freedom, the sons of God, and of course, the students of the prophets. Now, so we have that. We have Afar Hey, we have the Er Peh, the aroused mouth that needs to be fixed, and then we have the Rafe Ayin, the healing eye. And there's other ways we can permute these four letters, because four letters will produce a lot of different concepts. But because they're all the same letters, we group them together. And that's part of the organizational structure that the Aleph Bet provides to information, right? If you go to any company, they have an organizational chart, right? And if you have any scientist, he has his organization of information. And, well, the Kabbalah does that, well, just several thousand years earlier. It takes everything and organizes it according to the letters of their names and according to the numbers of those letters. So that's where Gematria, the Kabbalistic numerical system, comes into play. But when you start to learn these things, you say, there's no way that the human being invented this language. There's no way that a human being wrote this book, because there's too much, it's too embedded with information and codes and prophecies about the past and the future. And so, but we're trying to learn a little bit about today, right? How to become better people today. And what we need to do is be free of Paro, be free of that tyrant, that sorcerer, that person that even acknowledges God but still doesn't want to acknowledge him. Because there's that place in every one of us who actually says, yes, there's a God, but. And that but is always a little gateway to the other side. I believe in God, but I want to do what I want to do. I believe in God, but today I want to smoke a cigarette on Shabbat. Oh, I believe in God, but, I need to eat the food that I probably shouldn't eat. whatever it might be, it's the but that allows the other side a little hold on the holiness of our soul. And all Pesach is about getting free of that. So here on Shabbat HaGadol, we're going into this last goodbye to Pharoah. Goodbye. Let's say goodbye. We don't need him for a king. We have the King of Kings, Melech Malchei Melachim. We have the true king in our soul, Melech Berehitim. Rabbi Nachman says the king in the pathways is the Rehitei Moach, the pathways of the mind. God is already inside us. He's creating our consciousness. He's behind the very things we think to teach us about what we need to fix. We wouldn't even know what to fix if it wasn't for these signals that are coming from the other side. So when we look at our own thoughts, we have to say, why did I think that? The minute you ask why you thought something, you're activating a higher mental, spiritual power. Because we have thought. We think, we live in our thoughts. But when you think about your thoughts, you're accessing a higher power of soul because you're now looking out, down, so to speak, at what you think. And when you know that God is sending you your thoughts, well, then life changes. And that's something that I'm working on in a book that hopefully be pretty soon. You know, it's been a few years down the road. There's a book called The Path of Personal Prophecy that I'll be putting out that deals exactly with this idea. How do we hear God in our own being, in our words, in our hearts, in our minds? And this idea, you know, it takes it home. When you take it home, you know, you're not alone anymore. God doesn't have to be in a book. He is in the book. He's in everything. But when you know he's in your own mind, all we have to do is look at ourselves with the right eye, with this healing eye that we had, the Rafei Ayin, right, which is Pharoah. You turn Pharoah around, and what happens is that the evil king becomes the one who tells you what we need to fix, where I need to focus, where my mistake was. And the minute you do that, you're actually being a divine being. Why? Because you're judging yourself. See, all the animals are also created by God, but they don't judge themselves. They don't need to. They're created a certain way and they operate according to their program. But we have this power to operate, well, not exactly according to the program of the Torah. We have the 10 Commandments, and that's hard enough, right? But what happens is when we judge ourselves in heaven, they say, we don't need to judge Avraham. He's judging himself, right? Jane's judging herself. When we judge ourselves, automatically we're being divine beings. We're doing something that nobody else does. And that brings down the sweetening of judgment and the expansion of consciousness. And we leave Egypt, and we cross the sea, and we come out in the expanse of the free land, free people, and our enemies become our servants. And that's one of the teachings of the future world, right? Because God is not interested in killing anybody. God is not interested in people dying. God is interested in goodness. And all of us have a spark of it. And, well, the people who do the work, when they turn the negative into the positive, they become a force for that perfect will that will bring about the redemption of humanity, the healing of all our pain, the end of all wars, the end of all Pharaohs, shall we say, wherever they are and whatever country they happen to be dominating at any time in human history. So we got to work on our Pharoah, work on the stiff neck, turn it into the healing mouth, the healing eye, and you'll see that your life will change. And it's work. But once you get it, and you believe in yourself, and you believe in your power, then you're in redemption. You're in Geula, which is redemption. And all you have to do in Geula is Galut. All you do is switch the Aleph. The Aleph is the first letter of the Aleph Bet. And therefore, it is the Alufo Shel Olam, the champion of the world. And when you're attached to him, everything turns good. God bless you all. Have a great Shabbat. We'll be on Rabbi Nachman every day on Patreon. We'll be on YouTube, Facebook, Inside Timer, Web Yeshiva, a few other places. So look for us, and God bless you all. Shabbat Shalom.